My name is Leo, and today I'm going to share a story about why I believe I have superpowers. When I was little, my mom passed away from cancer, leaving just my dad, our loyal dog, and me. I can't recall many details about my mom, but her beautiful face still lingers in my memories despite the fact that I last saw her when I was only 4 years old. But don't worry, I'm doing just fine. My dad is truly amazing. He's not only my father but also my brother and my closest friend. At times, he can be quite a disciplinarian, almost like a grandpa, especially when he insists on not listening to music while walking down the street. But I suppose even grandpas can have some wisdom. When I turned 15, I was walking back home from school, just as I always did, with my headphones on. And then disaster struck. A car collided with me. I hadn't heard the car coming as I crossed the street. A speedy car turned the corner and knocked me into a coma. I can't recall anything from that moment onward, except for the image of my dog peering at me through the window, filled with excitement. That was my last memory. I regained consciousness a year later. Yes, I missed celebrating my sweet 16. When I finally woke up, I noticed that my once short hair had grown significantly longer. This prompted me to ask, how long was I asleep? My dad responded, his eyes brimming with tears. It's been 1 year since last Tuesday, my dear. I cried as well, mainly because I missed my sweet 16, but also because the thought of my dad worrying about me for an entire year filled me with regret for not heeding his advice about those earbuds. When the doctors examined me, they delivered the news that I still had lingering damage, and that a portion of my memories would forever remain lost. They also informed me that I'd require physical therapy since I hadn't walked for an entire year. It was incredibly frightening to hear all of that. When I finally managed to get out of bed, my initial attempts were disastrous, as I struggled to maintain my balance. The doctor assured me that it would take some time to regain a sense of normalcy. I truly hope they were right. About a week later, they released me to go home. It was then that I was reunited with Leo, my faithful dog. He began whimpering and sniffing me, and it was clear that he remembered me. I was overwhelmed with emotion, knowing that I had caused so much worry for everyone. So, I asked my dad for some time alone and retreated to my room, where I cried myself to sleep. A few hours later, my dad woke me up and brought a pizza to my bedside. He sat down next to me and started asking questions like, do you remember your mom's name? Can you recall her face? Do you know my full name? I chuckled and replied, of course, it's Gavin. Your name is Ryan. I made a playful gesture, tapping him on the shoulder, but then it dawned on me that I couldn't remember if I had any friends. So, I turned to my dad and asked, Dad, do I have friends? He responded with warmth, yes, my sweetheart, you have many, many friends, and they're all eagerly waiting for you at school. Some even visited you in the hospital a few times. I felt a deep sense of guilt that I couldn't recall their names or faces. As I gradually recovered, I returned to school, and to my surprise, all the kids seemed to know me so well. I didn't recognize any of them. It was overwhelming. So I decided to head back home. My dad saw me crying once more, so he embraced me and reassured me that everything would be all right. He promised to explain the situation to my friends the next day. The following morning, my dad accompanied me to school and informed everyone that I had lost my memory. He kindly requested that they reintroduce themselves to me. They formed a line, each person sharing how and where we had met. These conversations stirred deep emotions within me. These people appeared to be such good friends, but I couldn't recall any of them. After school, I went shopping with my friends, only to realize that I had no money on me. I asked if they could wait while I went home to retrieve some. Upon arriving home, I headed to the basement and retrieved a box of money, taking a few dollars. My dad caught sight of me and seemed upset. He asked, "What are you doing?" I explained that I was taking my own money. He countered with, "How do you know it's yours?" I found myself pondering, unsure how I could truly know. Nevertheless, my dad instructed me to put the money back and handed me some cash from his wallet. I couldn't help but wonder why he'd made me put it back if he had just admitted it was mine. As I spent the day with my friends, the thought lingered in my mind. That evening, my dad acted a bit strangely, hardly speaking to me. I began to feel a tinge of fear, as if I had done something wrong. Suddenly, I heard my dad say, "Luna, could you please bring me my documents?" He didn't specify which documents he needed, but somehow I managed to deduce it. When I handed them to my father, he tightly gripped my hand and demanded, "How did you know where they were?" "I never told you. Tell me everything you know." Struggling for an explanation, the only thing that came to mind was that I possessed the ability to read minds. He suspected that maybe my uncle had shared this information with me, but the truth was I hadn't seen my uncle since I woke up, and I hadn't reached out to him either. I retreated to my room, puzzled by the situation. I contemplated searching the internet for information on mind reading, but I found no concrete proof of its existence. Moreover, I couldn't bear the thought of unveiling my supposed mind-reading abilities to the world and risking embarrassment. Instead, I decided to test my theory by asking my friends about topics they had never disclosed to me, attempting to guess their thoughts. To my bewilderment, I failed miserably. It left me utterly perplexed. How could I know two things that my dad had never shared with me? My father, too, seemed intrigued by the mystery. I delved deeper into my quest for answers, but my efforts yielded no results. One night, as I ventured to the kitchen to grab a late-night snack, I overheard my dad engaged in a phone conversation, saying Luna knows everything. What should I do? I stood there in shock, pondering what knowledge I could possibly possess that he didn't want me to discover. What was he keeping hidden from me? I yearned to ask him, but I understood that if I did, he would likely be relieved that I remained unaware, thereby withholding any revelations. Thus, I continued pretending to be privy to his secrets while intensifying my efforts to unearth the truth. But, at the same time, I harbored deep concerns about what I might uncover. I hadn't even spent a year here, and already there were so many secrets. My relationship with my dad started to drift apart as a result. I reasoned that if the truth was going to inflict pain, it would be wiser to gradually distance myself from my dad rather than abruptly severing ties. I began socializing more with friends, dedicating less and less time to my dad, and losing interest in his enigmatic mysteries. Then, I met this guy named Levi. He was slightly older than me, old enough to have his own apartment, but not by much. We crossed paths in a bar, and he asked me out. A week later, we officially started dating, and I found myself frequently absent from home for days at a time. My dad persistently called me, but I chose to ignore his calls. It seemed he still believed I held knowledge about everything, and was attempting to make amends for his concealed secrets. Levi and I shared a profound love for each other. He even expressed readiness to move in with me. I decided to return home to inform my dad that I planned to move out when I turned 18 next month. My dad appeared deeply disappointed and asked, "So soon? You're not even going to introduce this guy to your dad first?" I replied rather rudely, suggesting that even if I did introduce Levi, it wouldn't change my decision. So, I began packing my belongings, preparing for my impending departure. However, one night, I felt unwell and ended up vomiting. Just like any girl in a relationship would, I thought it might be wise to take a pregnancy test. To my surprise, the test came back positive. I found myself uncertain about how to share this news with Levi, as he had never broached the topic of children before. I still remained in the dark about his feelings regarding kids. So, I decided to gently break the news to him in the hope of calming his reaction. When he arrived home, I adorned the pregnancy test with blue and pink ribbons and presented it to Levi, playfully asking him which color he preferred. But suddenly, chaos erupted, and all I could see were objects flying through the air. I couldn't believe it. My sweet boyfriend had transformed into a monster. His violent outburst left me with no choice but to flee. He hit and kicked me, but thankfully, the neighbors intervened, allowing me to escape. All I could hear were the hurtful names he called me. Who would have imagined that our relationship could take such a dark and twisted turn? I returned home with a black eye, along with scratches and bruises covering my body. When my dad opened the door and saw my condition, he clutched his chest and collapsed to the floor, needing assistance himself. I burst into tears, screaming for help in a frenzy. 2 ambulances arrived, and they transported us separately to the hospital. We were both placed in different emergency rooms. I wished desperately that every moment since I found out I was pregnant wasn't real. The doctor reassured me that the baby was fine and that my wrist had a minor crack, but everything else was in order. Unable to wait any longer, I rushed to see my dad. The doctor informed me that my dad was very ill, and he had been battling this illness for the past year, and this time, it was especially severe. I couldn't believe the news I was hearing. I felt an overwhelming sense of sadness that left me unable to stop crying. I called my uncle and waited for him to return home because he was our only family. The police arrived to question me about the incident, so I recounted everything that had transpired. Levi was subsequently arrested, and I spent the night with my father. During the middle of the night, my father awoke and told me that he had forgiven me. He believed I was aware of his illness, which is why I left him. I was overwhelmed with confusion about what to do next. I attempted to clarify to my father that I genuinely didn't know about his condition, and that I had been pretending to know in the hopes of uncovering the truth. However, it seemed like he could no longer hear me, as he withdrew into his own world. My uncle arrived in the morning, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of anger because he hadn't shared this critical information with me earlier. It was then that my uncle decided it was time to reveal the entire story. He explained that when the doctors had informed my dad that I might not wake up for a long time, and possibly never, he had suffered a heart attack. Since then, his heart had been progressively weakening, and he had been saving money for my future. He also disclosed that I must have overheard my father talking to my uncle while I was in a coma, which was how I knew things my dad had never directly told me. My father knew that his time was limited, so he had prepared financial security for my future. My selfishness in using the money for shopping had hurt him deeply, and I had ignored his sacrifices. He hadn't wanted me to bear the guilt of his illness due to my irresponsibility, so he kept it a secret and planned to take care of his health discreetly, hoping that we could lead a happy life together. Regrettably, my immaturity and thoughtlessness led to his demise. I could never forgive myself for the pain I had caused, and I wasn't sure if I would ever get the opportunity to apologize and share the news that he was going to be a grandfather. At present, he was in a very critical condition, and the outcome remained uncertain.